Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name's Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan. How you doing, mate?
Hey, good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And all the way back from episode 32 of our podcast, we have Aaron. How you doing, Aaron?
Nice to see you guys. A little older, a little wiser, but here we are once again. Great to be with you.
That's it. That's
I
it. I
love it.
like it. Well, this podcast is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabucasa. For a small monthly fee, you'll unlock powerful features like secure, effortless access to your system from anywhere, your choice of voice assistants, offsite backups, and more. All configurable in the UI with no YAML needed. It also supports the development of Home Assistant, ESPHome, and other Open Home Foundation projects. Click the link in the description to learn more. We'd also like to give a shout out to our Patreon members, including our executive producers, Benny and Rob. You can help support the show and get early access to episodes, all in an ad-free feed. To support the show, check out homeassistant.fm and click Patreon in the menu. And if you can't do that, we'd appreciate a like, comment, or rating wherever you're listening or watching us today. It really helps us out. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today once again. As I said, it was episode 32 we last had you on, which was the release of Home Assistant 0.70, so 70, and it was in August 2018. So it's been a little bit of a minute. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys again.
Yeah, you too, mate. I always see you around on GitHub. Like you are, tell me if I'm wrong, but from my opinion, you're very much still active in the Home Assistant, project, plugging away. I think last time we had you on, you had done a Rain Machine integration refactor.
Mhm.
I think you've done some other integration work as well. Can you catch us up? Are you still, developing on Home Assistant? What are you, what other components are you touching at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Really, since we last talked, gosh, it felt like at the time I was just kind of really starting to get my feet wet, not only as a Home Assistant developer, but as a user.
Yeah.
We were in our first home. It was the spot where we were able to kind of put our first, compendium of automation gear in place. And Rain Machine was sort of the first kind of foray into developing, for the project. And just by interesting way of remembrance, at the time, one of my big drivers of getting involved with the project was, I was at a point in my career where I wasn't a software developer anymore. I was managing software developers, which has its own joys, I guess. But of course, I think to be a good leader, you had to kind of make sure your team was the one that could own the product and you couldn't be the one diving into code anymore. And as much as I love that, I just felt like, man, this itch is missing and I need to scratch it. And Home Assistant provided this really great opportunity to participate in a really, prolific project, keep my skills sharp and whatnot. So, kind of going from Rain Machine, probably the big ones that I think about, I took over ownership of the SimpliSafe integration, the security system that, DIYers love to a degree. We can dive into all the nitty gritty details there, but SimpliSafe is probably the primary one that I still am pretty heavily involved in. Ambient weather station. I did a tile integration back in the day, those little Bluetooth trackers.
Yeah.
I still use those. Love those. Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a point where I was ravenous. I was thinking about, man, what are the devices I can add to Home Assistant? And I was almost pleased when I found ones that didn't have an existing integration because it provided me an opportunity. And therein lies, I think, the challenge of open source development is many of us would say you can have seasons of prolific output, and then you can have seasons of thinking, oh my goodness, all this is kind of resting on my back. But I'm still incredibly proud of just even getting to be associated with this project. As time has gone on here, many other friends and members of our family have become Home Assistant users, and to me, it still remains, I think, one of the best ways when somebody who's non-technical asks, "What is open source software? What does that really mean?" Without delving into dev speak, I can say, look at this project, look at these people, look at what they've created and the impact it's having around the world. I've yet to come across a project quite like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's multifaceted, right? And it's funny because we always talk about this on the podcast, but you're actually doing it, which is it's still, whether it's you're upskilling yourself to learn a new skill, or if in your case, Aaron, it's more of keeping yourself continuing to stay sharp, right? Like
Mhm.
in an aspect of your life that you're not really doing anymore, or aspect of your career you're not really doing anymore in terms of coding, right? And moving in more into a leadership role kind of thing. So that's yeah, that is pretty awesome. And yeah, the community is just amazing. And that's a great way to point out and describe it, like, oh yeah, here, like you can do this thing. Like, look at this, right? What's here's what's cool about it. So
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to kind of watch the community continue to build a system that is so robust. It's actually
yeah.
interesting that we're talking now. I've actually, since we all last connected, I've had a pretty kind of abrupt change in my career where I have returned to being a startup founder. I'm a CTO, but that means I'm in the weeds and coding all day, every day on
Oh,
Oh
our
nice.
wow.
business, and so it's been this interesting transition for me. And gosh, we also happen to have a 1 year old, and man, what an interesting decision that was to raise a 1 year old and have a
I
startup at
was
the
going
same
to say
time.
that's one of my notes to you because last time we spoke, you were sort of like, oh, kids are on the like we were still deciding kids, and I was like, well, that's going to change your smart home too. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to get into that too. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, yeah, there's that, but I've learned a lot about myself through that process. But what's so interesting to kind of think about what Home Assistant is to me now. Previously, when I got involved, I was the quintessential endless tinkerer. It was equal parts keeping my skills sharp, equal parts hobby, equal parts kind of lifestyle in many ways. And
Right.
now in this season of life, with these two things, work kind of demands the majority of my day energy. My family is where I want to place my outside of that energy. And I've started to have those moments of Home Assistant or otherwise, oh my gosh, like my brain is slipping off of things that I used to understand intrinsically. And what's really special about Home Assistant in this season is it has evolved with me. There's an alternate reality in which I made this change, and this carefully crafted system that I had helped put together and bolt together just crumbled because I was no longer able to devote my full energy to it. And we'll dive into this, I'm sure. What I have found is far from that. Not only is it maintaining its utility, and it's such a critical component of our life. Um, my point in my own life right now is such that I kind of need to be told exactly what the next thing I'm doing is. I'm so focused on the work or the raising a child or whatever. My brain is very focused on just the next step. Home Assistant has really started to help me do that. It's shifted from being the tinkerer's landscape into, okay, you're working. Here's what you need to focus on. Oh, you've been sitting at your desk for a while. Here's what you need to do now. Oh, you're about to put your son down. You forgot to start the dishwasher. Remember, you want to do that. And it's just interesting how, like a good friend in some ways, it has evolved with me. It didn't demand that I remain who I was in order to participate, which is kind of cool.
And I think, would you say that that's also because the product or the project itself has matured in that it's more stable now as opposed to, back in the zero release days? Um, in that, it doesn't, you're not having so much breaking changes, you're not waking up to a rebooted instance that's reset itself. It's just there. It's stable.
Absolutely. And all the credit to the team. I know, Frank has taken over kind of the grand engineering efforts. I mean, unbelievable kudos to everybody for exactly that, Phil.
Yeah.
There was a point in time, I remember when I first got engaged with Home Assistant, and this is not any shade towards the project, but it was a tinkerer's landscape. It was a
Oh,
developer's
absolutely it
landscape. I
was.
mean, you guys remember that. And I think the big moment of realization for me was actually fairly recently. My right in time for us to have our first child, my mother-in-law moved in about 5-6 minutes away from us into a nice new home. And it took a while, but one of our Christmas gifts to her was, let's get you hooked up with some home automation. And we've got the platform for it. Setting up, we got her the Home Assistant Green. Gone are the days of a Raspberry Pi or some,
Mm.
VM I'm hosting
Yeah.
somewhere. And I had a reaction, guys, when we set that up. I had this sort of duality of like incredible just awe and also frustration. Like, this is too simple to set this up now.
What
It
have
was
I
my
missed?
first.
What
Yeah,
is going to go wrong?
yeah, it was one of my first like old man Home Assistant moments of wanting to be like, you don't get it. Back in my day, back in our day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I just remember setting her up, and she has Z-Wave, and we got also SimpliSafe and all this stuff in there. And her house is up and running with not just the connections, but meaningful automations that we put together in like 30 minutes. And I, there's a part of my brain back like, well, at about week 7, I think we had, pieces and parts of this. So you're absolutely right, Phil, that the dedication and the longevity. Now that I'm back in full-time professional software development, I am reconnecting with that strange duality of having passion for your craft, but also having to have pretty consistent energy to stick with something over a long haul. The people involved in this project have stuck with it for the long haul. And in the latest release notes, obviously there's so much to talk about in there. But Frank mentioned something where you're seeing here what is the results of a 2-year effort. I can't recall an open source project that wasn't sponsored by some big corporate entity where people collectively decided they were going to spend 2 years working towards something. So to your point, Phil, that the longevity, but also the dedication to that longevity. There's an alternate reality in which Home Assistant didn't turn out that way, and holy moly, has it turned out that way.
Yeah, it is crazy, and I think like kudos to everyone at Home Assistant, right? Like, there are just a whole team of people, departments and everything working on this whole ecosystem now, and because they're all on mission, right? Like they can take 2 years to develop an idea and refine it and test it out and then put it into practice. You just mentioned there that you set up your mother-in-law with a Home Assistant Green. When we last spoke, you were using a Raspberry Pi 3, and I think one of your claims was that you've never had an SD card failure. What are you running Home Assistant on today? Did you ever get an SD card failure along the way?
I avoided. And that's not anything I did. I made a bold claim and I never got bit by it, so that all worked out.
That's lucky.
It's interesting. So since we last talked, COVID happened and the world went home, and there was a point in time where, certainly being an executive at a software executive, but also having a lot of time on my hands, well, I could tinker even more than I was tinkering before. And so I went down the road of, and it's still running now, a little kind of IBM ThinkStation running Proxmox with all these VMs and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Very cool. There is a little part of my brain now that's like, oh my goodness, if this thing breaks, like, what am I going to do? It's such an interesting philosophical argument. But
that's what backups are for.
That's right. I've never tested my backups, Rohan, which is rule 1, but let's presume we're in good shape.
Fair enough,
But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. That used to be such an incredible point of pride that I run a Home Assistant in a VM. I've got all these peripherals connected through Proxmox, and I'm running all sorts of stuff. And now, setting up my mother-in-law with the Green, before they decided to retire it, back, I think when we talked, I was just setting up my parents with Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi. We graduated them to a yellow. There is a part of me, I love how sharpened my capabilities were in my own home setup, but there's a part of me is a little jealous of you guys just plug in this hub and it's good to go. There is a delightful, I'm craving simplicity in my life right now. And it's just interesting how the sides of my brain are warring with each other. The technologist who believes he can do anything, and then the one who looks at how far this has come. And of course the jealousy is a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's such a cool example of how this project, and not just the project itself, but let's call out that when we talked last, Nabu Casa didn't exist and the Open Home Foundation didn't exist. And what brilliant thinking that this ought to outlive all of us, in a bigger sense. But there was a point in time where I remember, we were very focused on developers, and we were developers, and we were developer use cases. And I remember the articles being written by, Ars Technica. It's a cool platform, but you got to be pretty tech savvy, and this is not, for typical people. And that was always a little bit of a black mark. And now, you could put this in front of somebody who's quote unquote non-technical, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who couldn't get up and running in some meaningful way. And so, but to your question, Phil, there's a part of me that goes, oh God, I hope my beloved little setup continues to run here. But if not, I'll tell you what, as long as this kind of season of my life continues, you may see me procuring a pre-built hub pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I get the jealousy too. I have a Home Assistant Green as just I think it runs my Matter server, only because Home Assistant Green has the Home Assistant OS, but my main instance that runs my house is just a repurposed old desktop PC that runs Docker. And, so I don't have add-ons, I don't have the whole Home Assistant OS experience. And when I go to that Green, I can go, oh, I can just download that add-on, or I can just download that and now it's running, right? Like I don't have to worry about doc commands and compose files.
And
Yeah, like
and being that guy that moved from, the Docker setup, all that stuff to I mean, I'm running mine on my yellow right now, but it is that Home Assistant OS experience is pretty delightful, right? Like, and don't get me wrong, I still have a ton of Docker stuff I run at home. I've got Proxmox running. I've got whatever. I've got a cluster of stuff, but this is one where I'm just like, you know what? I need a little more availability on it. I don't want whatever I'm playing with to break this or any of that kind of stuff. So here it is, its own dedicated little appliance. I'll make the exception and have a separate hub essentially for that, right? And then with the advent of being able to say, hey, here's my remote BLE stuff using BLE proxy, and then even my Z-Wave antenna here that's now remote, right? It's works great, right? Even because it's in a server rack in the basement.
It looks excellent on your rack, like your rack behind you there. What a nice piece of art that antenna is.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's funny because I actually kind of like it there, right?
Yeah.
I originally was going to put the Zigbee one here, or sorry, the Zigbee and Z-Wave ones out, but then I just a tease before it came out. But I figured a lot of people would not at Nabucasa would not love for me to show off stuff before it comes out. So,
You're suddenly
you know,
the reverse whistleblower that you never intended to be.
yeah, exactly. So that didn't,
There's
and
another
then
fascinating thing though, that gosh, when we last talked, this organization was not producing hardware, not
no.
like, and beloved developers, like, okay, we've known a lot of developers. I know people who produce hardware, cool, super neat projects. They are not
yeah,
looking terribly great, or it's not something you give your
Yeah.
mom for Mother's Day. How cool.
yeah,
We've got hubs, we've got voice assistants, you've got antennas, and
yeah.
there's the same attention to the craft that the core experience has. Um, my goodness, this is just I wonder, and I really hope that anybody who engages with this project and this organization understands you are witnessing something that is like, this may be a once in a generation collective effort here that isn't owned by some corporate entity somewhere, and that the attention to detail, the care for the craft, and then it's available to people around the world. I mean, I don't know. We were talking before we started here, how we can tend to be in airplanes using Wi-Fi and complain how slow it is, forgetting that we're using Wi-Fi in an airplane. What a special thing that this organization doesn't just make wonderful software, it's made an experience and an ecosystem, to say nothing of all the partnerships that they've got going on. And gosh, what is, short amount of time, 5 years or whatever it's been here, if it's a little bit more, that's not a long time for that level of progress.
Yeah, that I agree. But again,
Okay,
power of open source, right?
That's right.
now last time we spoke, so you had the Raspberry Pi 3. Back then, I think AppDaemon was a big thing, and you might have been using,
Yeah.
I think it was Node-RED as well.
Wow.
Have
Yes.
you? I haven't heard of AppDaemon like in my circles for quite some time. Are you still using AppDaemon?
I haven't. Before it was after we talked, but kind of before maybe pandemic time frame. I remember I was still using AppDaemon, and it wasn't necessarily because I needed to. I was a Python developer, and so I just liked the idea. Skip ahead to where I'm at in my life now, and if I'm on the road somewhere and my wife and son are trying to get ready for bedtime and automations are breaking, I don't want to be like wire guarding in somewhere to edit Python stuff. I know it's still an active project.
Yeah, because AppDaemon is a way, for those that might not be familiar, is that you can run like a Python script instead of Home Assistant YAML automations or automations from the UI. It was the whole app that would power you to write, and you could do things like classes and hierarchy and all that. I'm not a Python developer myself, but I'm imagining it's much more of a programmer's tool to develop automations around the home with.
Absolutely. And it, one of the powers of it is it has, another project I was just recalling, PyScript is another one that's still very active, similar kind of concept. And of course it has elements of a traditional programming language that, the Home Assistant UI editor, which is beautiful and so functional, may struggle to communicate, like being able to do complex branches in a way that's not just straight if else, or loops that kind of take different forms or whatnot. What is so interesting, though, and I'm sure we'll talk about this plenty, the age that we're in of generative AI and LLMs being sort of this black box that you can shove input into and get output from, I'm really curious. And I love AppDaemon as a project. I love PyScript as a project. There will always be developers who want that kind of control. I don't know that we're there yet, but I'm curious about a world in which there are more and more kind of language model backed integrations within Home Assistant, and the typical user is just shoving input into them and getting output. And as long as that input and output is kind of structured how you would expect, it's doing all the complex logic that you used to have a programming language to do. I am curious about that. And gosh, in 2018, AppDaemon's on the rise. I'm using it. I could have never expected that.
But I would have to imagine. Like, I'm imagining a world of like, right now we have helpers in Home Assistant, right? Like, input booleans, input selects. Maybe there's a new class of helper, like isn't an AI helper, right? Like, and it's just got a focus thing, right? Maybe you've got an AI helper to count the number of objects in a picture, right? And its input is a picture and what you want it to count, and it returns a number. Like,
absolutely. I think about kind of we talked about this, I think previously, that one of my favorite sensors, and always has been, is the Bayesian binary sensor. I can't track this thing, but if I can sort of intuit things around it, then I can make a statistical estimation whether something is true or false. Oh my goodness. And from my own work, and LLMs can, with the properly structured data, do that to the nth degree. I'm interested to see more of those kind of moments of, there's not just kind of a algorithm somewhere that is doing things like presence simulation. There is an LLM that's chewing on reams and reams of database data to understand specifically when you are at home or not home. And there's just a new kind of intelligence there that, of course, doesn't solve every problem, but it is a tool in the toolbox that last time we talked, I sure didn't see coming. Not at all.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think one of the things that I'm really enjoying lately, and kind of, this isn't generative AI specifically, but it's just indicative of maybe where I'm at in my journey. I used to be, so in my career, I was a back-end engineer. I was never a front-end. My front-end engineering ended like when jQuery was a thing in JavaScript. I am so far behind, I'll never catch up. And part of my challenge always was, it's kind of like a person who can't play an instrument, but they've got a little ear for music, and they can just sort of scratch what's going on with the music, but they're never going to be a musician. I'm kind of that way in this particular sense here. And I've kind of started to realize about the front end, I was obsessed with building the perfect dashboard. It's got to look right. It's got to have the right stuff. It's got to be aesthetically pleasing, driving myself insane. I've gotten a ton of utility out of kind of the default home dashboard now that kind of surfaces your areas to you, and it also surfaces to you. I'm looking at mine right now, and there's my SimpliSafe. There's a couple lights. There's a little input boolean I have to run our robot vacuum when we turn on good night mode. What is interesting about this, and this isn't the same as large language models, but what I'm seeing here is something that is surfacing itself to me at a time when it seems to think I might need that particular function. Man, I'll tell you what, that's clicking with my mentality right now. If I need to just figure out the next step I'm taking in my day to day, oh, thank God, I didn't have to go look up in some dashboard somewhere.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I've said this 1,000 times too. I hate I don't hate the process of, no, I do hate the process of building dashboards. When I'm done a dashboard and it looks beautiful and all that stuff, I'm very satisfied. And then that satisfaction ends like the next day after I forget that I've just spent all this time doing this and whatever. And then I'm like, well, crap, I just wasted like a week
you load up
building
Reddit
this thing. And right.
And you load up Reddit and someone's got, the next best thing out there. And you're like,
yes.
Now I want to do it that way.
And it looks so good.
Exactly, right? And you're like, oh my God, this is so much better. Why didn't I do that? And, gone are the days where I care to do that anymore.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's why, one thing I've always loved about the project, and I feel like it has continued, I'm certainly, using this, is it never married itself to any one particular input modality. Of course, your UI was it at the beginning, but it didn't stay that way for long. And it sort of became, well, if you want to build dashboards and that's your thing, knock yourself out. You want to use a dashboard we built for you? Great. You want to make voice assistants your thing and you primarily want to talk to your home? Love it. This is a big one for me lately. You want to just let the automations run and let the system see in the background? Totally fine. Especially as I think about so many different corporate software products that we've all used before. It's rare to see, hey, pick the modality that makes sense to you. Usually we're going to pick the modality we think you're going to want and we're going to shove it down your throat. Wonderful to just see how orthogonal the Home Assistant has been and how everything was designed in such a way so that it was modular, it was peaceable, and you could decide what you wanted to leave behind in a moment.
Yeah, there's also one of those things where it's like if it's built for everyone, it's built for no one. But in this case, it more or less is built for everyone, right? And
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say that it is still complex, but to what you said earlier, you could probably pick it up and figure it out in not that long of a time, right? And it's so I think there's some value there, but I think it can be a lot easier too at the same time, with that said, right? But like kind of like you look at the HomeKit experience and that kind of stuff, but then there's pros and cons with all of those, right? So
yeah, certainly. Well, you're absolutely right. And there's always going to be those of us who you unbox the HomeKit experience and look how elegant it is, and it just works as long as you purchase the correct devices, of course. But how many times have we, been in a particular situation? Yes, we're technically savvy people, but even people who aren't necessarily. And you know what? I don't particularly like how you're telling me to use this. I would love to do this. Oh, you can't do that. I think we've yet to run into something short of an integration in Home Assistant, just not actively providing the functionality, which God bless the development community. Certainly the core team, the Nabu team, they are our anchor. I'm thinking of the reams and reams and reams of people like myself who have just kind of chipped in their time. It's a rare moment that you want to do something with Home Assistant and you can't get there. Whether it's
absolutely
complicated or whatever, but man, what a special thing. And, again, to our point here, one of the things I'm enjoying in this season, I used to kind of look at the forums and look at Reddit, and to your point, Ryan, I would kind of be like, oh man, you've made a killer dashboard. Well, look at that great automation. Like yeah. I need to come up with something like that. Man, I'll tell you what, right now, I am sponging people's ideas left and right because I just don't have the brain power to come up with it myself. There again, let's promote the community. Thank you everybody for making this what it is.
100%. 100%, right? And the community is a great way of doing that. And again, the forums, Reddit, all of those sources, even the Facebook group has a lot of good ideas on there and stuff too, right? Or sometimes people just be like, hey, look at what I did. And it's like, that's cool. I want to do that. How'd you do that? Right? And people are usually pretty willing to share.
Absolutely. I guess underpinned in all this is, in a world with a lot of its own challenges, what a neat platform that not only produces tactile meaning, but it also produces, look, we're talking to each other because of this project. People are sharing stuff because of this project. People are employed because of this project. There's an element of humanity at play here too, which gets lost, I think, again, in a lot of, oh, cool, I saw this thing on GitHub and it does whatever. We talk about that forever, but I just feel like, man, what in a short amount of time, this project went from really powerful kind of tinkerer's thing to a force and a movement in a way, and did it elegantly, which is not easy to do.
And it's still going, like it's not slowing down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before, we've mentioned a couple times now, you've got seasons in your life and you've changed your season now. You're now a father, and you've got a whole new career projection. Have you had to, how stable has Home Assistant been through those seasons? Have you had to tear it down and do a whole new automation? Have you started from scratch, or have you had like a sort of base amount of automations that have stayed with you and you've then built on top of and scrapped others away?
Good question. Yeah, I'm always a little for lack of a better word, envious of. I would love. There's a part of me that would love to tear it down and start from scratch just to see what I would do differently this time around. But interestingly enough, this is also a season in which the idea of tearing down and starting from scratch is incredibly stressful. So, for better or worse, it's been sort of a continuation of what we've run for many years. What I would say is. I've noticed, just kind of jotting my notes down, I've noticed automations that we built long before this current season that have suddenly new utility that I didn't expect. Um, and then we've had automations where it's like, man, this has really changed, this element of life. We gotta fill the gap here in order to do something. And but both of those have had their kind of moments. So as an example, one of the kind of automations we had early on that I built because I thought it was an interesting idea. We never really used it all that much. Was we've got one of the original kind of Xiaomi robot vacuums. This sucker is all dented and scuffed, but he's running great. And there was a point in time where I was just pleased as punch that we could integrate that into Home Assistant. And at one point, I kind of started thinking about, well, long pre-LLM predictive intelligence stuff. Could we think about, when should we run this vacuum automatically? And the original Xiaomi is not terribly savvy. You can basically start it and stop it. And so I kind of started to think, well, what are the times in which it might be nice to run a vacuum? And my thinking was it's nice to run it when it's not a burdensome in our path kind of thing. So maybe that's when we go to bed. Maybe that's when we leave home. I was all, from the earliest stages, I flopped a lot between scenes and scripts for the idea of states the home should be in.
Yes.
But we carry, some we've used forever, depart home is generally when we drive away from our house. It does various things. Walk home versus drive home does different things. Good night does different things. Okay, so the vacuum, I started to think, well, why don't I just tie this to if I flip on an input Boolean, and when I say good night to our, lady of choice, voice lady of choice, it'll start the vacuum as everything kind of winds down. Cool idea at the time, but in practice, just never really made sense. It was always something we were forgetting to do, a whole host of reasons. I'll tell you what, though, now with our little one running around, we have dirty floors. We need to run our vacuum pretty regularly. And it's become this really kind of interesting opportunity now to build automation, extend that automation around. Okay, if I notice throughout the day the floor is dirty, I can talk to my voice assistant. And it's a 2-stage automation. Stage 1 is just, hey, we need to run the vacuum tonight. And all that does is it just turns that input Boolean on. And then good night that is driven into our brains. When we are done for the day, good night. Arms a security system, locks the doors, all that stuff. But now the house kind of responds with this little thing. But the sort of magic revelation there was, I'm flying around meetings, my wife's flying around meetings. When our son's with us, we're trying to manage him, and just being able to kind of turn and tell our voice assistant, hey, we need to run the vacuum tonight. That is a godsend in a way that I never anticipated back when I thought, oh, this would be a novel way to play with our vacuum. So to your question, the evolution, there's been a lot of those kind of micro tweaks, that things have shown up. I mentioned the dishwasher. Okay, we used to run our dishwasher like once every couple of days. Well, with our son, we're running it every day. We got a lot of dirty dishes. As happens when you guys know this, we had an unexpected surprise of our dishwasher of 10 years finally junked out, and so we needed to get a new one. And of course, they're all connected now. We use the Bosch Home Connect.
Yeah, nice. Yes.
And one of the things I learned, though, to my detriment, was if you set up, we try to schedule our dishwasher to run out of kind of peak hours so we don't get charged huge rates by our utility provider. But if you set up your schedule and then whoops, I forgot to put this spoon in there and I open it and close it again and we're good to go, right? No, you just killed your schedule. I didn't realize that initially. And it sounds silly, but man, when I'm coming down and I got a ton of meetings ahead of me, and we're trying to get my son over to daycare, not having a dishwasher done, and now I got to deal with that throughout the day, that represents meaningful stress. And so here again, a nice little multi-stage automation where I'm going to trust that we're going to run the dishwasher every night. When the one time during the day that I kind of open it and close it, that flips an input Boolean, says, okay, for that day, you've loaded this dishwasher at least once. And now we've tied it to good night with the kind of mobile alert so that when I run good night, if I've forgotten to reset the schedule, and I can tell this because the integration has all these sensors that I can pull off of, I get a little priority notification and my phone beeps at me regardless of what mode it's in. And I can go, oh, that's right. I need to remember to adjust our dishwasher schedule. So I'm really kind of leaning a lot on these simple automations to be my backstop so that I don't have to remember these things as much.
Yeah. How do you go with, I'm going to go back to the vacuum cleaner for a sec, toys being left around the house? Like, that is the one thing that I haven't been able to automate yet.
Same.
My kids aren't old enough to automate them, but it's just a robot vacuum trap, right? There'll be a hair tie left out or a ribbon somewhere, and it just destroys the
and for some reason, Roborock doesn't want to donate those the vacuums with the arms to
That's
me.
right.
Right? So
what you need, okay, Phil, I would drop everything. You need like CCTV in your house scanning for things on the floor. No, you know what? This is silly. What? I don't say goodnight until we clean up the floor, like clean up things for the day.
Yeah.
No, I didn't intend that. It just sort of worked out that way. But you know, there's a great example though. I think of, gosh, our mindset is how do we automate everything? And some of it I'm kind of learning is that there's always going to be automation that augments human behavior. There will be some automations that completely do everything for us. And I'm trying to get in the routine of like, okay, we do the dishes, we clean up the play area, we roughly put stuff away, and then good night. And that's when we sort of agree we're going to start all these activities. Kind of lowbrow, but that's what I'm
yeah. No, and then there's good habits to get into, right? Then the house is tidy and
that's right.
You've told the house what's going on and what you wanted to do for the day.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mentioned, that's one side of kind of extending automations that we always had. There have been some net new things where I don't have to buckle down and go build this. One of the big ones for us, we're really fortunate. Alternating Fridays, his grandmas watch him. So 1 week it's my mom, 1 week it's my mother-in-law, back and forth. And one of the things that's really important is I wanted to be able to do two things when our moms are over. And this, by the way, coalesced into, well, anytime somebody's over. Number one, I wanted to automatically have kind of a guest mode kick on. And our guest mode is just disabling certain automations, like the one that locks up our house if we're not there. That's something I don't want triggering if guest mode's on. And I started, thinking about, of course I can manually do that, but that's no fun. I could set up roughly I know what their schedules are. I could make corresponding automations. Well, that evolved into, what if we made a Google Calendar and we put their schedules on Google
Calendar, yeah.
That's it. And what this has evolved into now is this interesting combination of the calendar doing two things, enabling guest mode and also enabling this slightly complex guest entry system wherein our moms who have iPhones, they can use the iOS Shortcuts app. We've given them a shortcut, and it has the ability to talk to various of our scenes, walk home, drive home, good night, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, a lot we can talk about in there, but what's cool about the automation is, security guy in my brain, I trust our moms entirely. I don't like the idea of shortcuts just being out in the wild that could unlock our house at any point. And so what we've done here is we've got a really great system that kind of understands, it's mom's scheduled time. That calendar kicks on, that turns on an input Boolean that does some stuff in the background to effectively say, if I get a shortcut from an ID number that looks like this, and we've tied those together, then I'm going to go ahead and run the action. Good night, open up, lock the house, whatever. And that's been just a really cool kind of realization of, here again, I want to make their lives easier. I want lives for any guests to be easier. I'm in a season of life where a lot of times I've been caught unawares of, oh my God, they're coming tomorrow. I'm not set up for that. But now, because I can kind of schedule it ahead of time on our calendars for them, or if we have family coming into town, I just put that on our calendar, and then it kicks on the ability for this shortcut to work to control various things in the house without having to onboard them into the full Home Assistant experience. I'm pretty pleased with that one.
Nice. Are you doing any, because you said they're on the iPhone ecosystem, are you doing any HomeKey or anything like that with?
Not yet. And primarily, the oldest devices in our house are the Z-Wave locks that we got 10 years ago when they built the house. I would love to upgrade them. The kind of stickler in me can't quite bring myself to do it yet until they die. Um, but there is an interesting kind of notion there of, man, well, if I'm talking about family members of varying levels of technical capabilities, it sure would be nice if they could just kind of come up and scan something and be ready to roll. So, we'll see where we go from there.
That's awesome. It's I've recently found so I changed jobs, started a new job, whatever, and my new company, I guess their locks all uh they use some HID system. I don't know exactly what, but there's an app for it now, and it ties into, I guess, some form of home key or work key, I guess.
Nice.
And I've been using my Apple Watch and my phone to open the doors, and I was like, "This is life changing."
Yes.
And I know I'm like so behind, and being being somebody who hosts a podcast on home automation and stuff like this. So the first time I've done it was literally like Monday, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is really cool."
Right, and you're not behind. You're the everyman, right? This is life. We're
Right.
just we're
That's
catching
right.
up as we can. But what a
That's
cool.
right. As a host, I'm relatable. Let's
That's
do
right.
that. Okay.
That's right. That's right. I'm not in some ivory tower that you can't understand. But how
That's
cool,
right.
like, and I love that idea of more and more. What if you could? I keep tinkering with this idea, and we'll see when my mental space expands to get there. But with Home Assistant as the backbone, I am really weaving away from dashboards and like manual controls and things. And I'm just thinking, if I can talk, or I can use something I'm wearing, or something could just happen intelligently because that's what I wanted it to do, that would be the ultimate. And it's funny, back when we talked in 2018, even before then, when I first got involved in the project, I remember that V1 of the Home Assistant website, and Paulus had written kind of a manifesto about what his vision of the smart home. And I remember there was a lot of that in there. There was a lot of kind of his own reflections on the difference between home control and home automation. I lost sight of it for many years because I was just loving being in the weeds with building integrations and all this stuff. But man, I'll tell you, just what you're talking about, where I'm at right now, maybe where we're all at as life evolves, just being able to talk at something, use something that's on your body, or something that just works the way it should. That there's such a delightful simplicity in that. I'm not saying it destroys the tinkering that maybe some people really enjoy to do. But it's cool to see that his original vision was there. And I do think it's evolving that way, to have more of these input modalities that don't require you to know what button to press at what time and where to find it. And again, God bless Home Assistant. If you want to build 15 dashboards, have fun, go wild. But for many of us for whom that is just a little bit of an overwhelming proposition right now, I just love the idea of the system working the way you want it to. That's the dream, right?
Yeah.
Have you changed the way you decide on what to automate? For example, do you still build something because it's possible, or are you now taking a more measured approach and go, okay, I could automate this, but I won't because it might cause X, Y, and Z?
Oh my goodness, that is the question of the moment. So what pops to my mind? I have a good number of ESPHome devices around the house, which, by the way, to say nothing about how that project has evolved. Oh my goodness, the sheer number of consumer electronic components and stuff that have become available, and I think that is a whole podcast unto itself. Okay, but I got one in particular. It's my garage controller, and this was from the season of Aaron just, I'm going to tinker because I can. And this thing was kind of the Wemos D1 mini board, and it connected to a huge array. I mean, huge. It can handle enough pins for maybe 4 or 5 sensors. But I had like ultrasonic distance sensors on top of our cars, so I could detect if our cars were in the garage. Nice. I had, of course, the read sensors, so I could detect if the door was opened or closed, or opening or closing. Super cool. There is a part, knock on wood, please. I'm terrified that thing is going to blow up at some point. And the garage, like getting into the house through the garage or closing the garage is like 101. And I'm a little terrified that like in my neighborhood, I'm going to become the home automation guy who can't close his garage. So, I'm kind of using like my parents and my mother-in-law, I'm using them to kind of experiment with some more bespoke solutions. Number one, because I don't want to have them dealing with like ESPHome devices all over the place. That terrifies me a little bit. But also, it's there for a little experimentation just to see if something of mine blows up. What am I going to revert to? And so, for my mother-in-law, we're experiencing with that little RATGDO board. I forget the guy who made it, but the kind of plug and play open garage board.
The RATGDO.
Yeah, that's right.
Rage against the garage door opener.
That's right. So, yeah. I love that.
Which I just saw as we're recording this, Paul's put on LinkedIn. There was a New York Times article featuring the creator of the RATGDO.
No way!
Come on,
that's
now.
Awesome.
So
heck yeah. I know.
RATGDO is powered by ESPHome, so it's fantastic. Like,
I won't speak for Paul. So I know many of us have an internal rage vendetta against a certain organization that makes garage doors and kind of cut off our access prematurely. But anyway, it allowed projects like this to unfold. So to your question, Phil, there's a lot of those where I'm thinking, well, would it be smarter for me to get a little MyQ Chamberlain HomeKit thing like my folks have? And it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the thing I built, but it sure is reliable and it's sure a lot easier. And then maybe put like,
and if you need to replace it, you can just buy a replacement and plug it in.
That's it. And that, I think, Phil, is a key point. The thought right now of and again, I think the majority of what we're doing here, is fairly runs well. But okay, so my garage controller or even my server that I'm running a Home Assistant V on, if that blows up, it just means that's time I'm going to have to dedicate to solving, fixing, finding a solution. There's value in that. I'm already thinking about my son is 1, but as he grows, like I'm excited to kind of have him engage with me in all this. But there's also an element too where it's like, man, we're both, my wife and I, are working hard jobs. We're trying to, raise him, be together as a family. I don't want to duck hours and hours of my time into fixing something that should just work. And so it's a good question, and I'm glad you're bringing it up because I think I'm kind of hovering on the edge of kind of putting some stuff out there, testing some stuff, thinking about some stuff, kind of hoping that nothing changes and I can just move on with my life. I do think, ESPHome there is a great example of, it being a builder's platform and people, putting together their components, 3D printing enclosures, and that is not a bad thing in the slightest. That's what it should be. I don't know that the world is looking for grandma to pick up random bespoke, sensors that she can build. That's what it should be. I'm at a phase in my life at the moment, a season in my life where, I'm not going to ever kick back to where we were before Home Assistant of buying cloud products that are going to get shut down. And that's frustrating. But the number of things I'm building from scratch has definitely reduced. And part of that's time, but part of it's also an inclination, candidly.
Yeah, what's cool. Well, it's funny. You were talking earlier about, how much Home Assistants created people's full-time jobs and all this stuff. ESPHome, same thing. There's full out companies that are built around this, right? So you look at Apollo Automation, right, who we've had on the podcast before. All their stuff is awesome. Lewis at Everything Smart Home, same thing, awesome. All ESPHome based, right? And that's 2 of I don't know, a ton, right?
That's worth pointing out, Ryan, too, that I say it's a builder's platform, but also it became this incredible opportunity for other entrepreneurs out there to go, you know what? I can bridge the gap between a builder platform and whatever. So that is well worth highlighting. This whole ecosystem we're talking about, it enabled a bunch of entrepreneurs to bring a vision to life, which is really cool.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, you mentioned when we first had you on your podcast, on the podcast, that was, in your first house, so on and so forth. So safe to say you've moved. What was
Same.
that? It is the same. It's when you just bought. Okay, because I was scratch all of that because I was definitely going to ask you moving related questions. All right.
I have my thought though, if I can pretend I know where you're going, I did have that thought recently of man, if I had to. And we live in Denver in Colorado, which is one of those cities where it's booming, which is great, except everything's hyper expensive, not great. And I have that thought of oh my gosh, if I move somewhere and I had to I'm a Z-Wave guy and I want Z-Wave switches everywhere. I'm going to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars just outfitting a new house on Z-Wave stuff. So it's interesting how we love our home. It doesn't feel like it's enclosing us anyway, but there is an element of maybe what we all feel, which is I've put a lot of work into all this. And you can take your Home Assistant with you, but the hardware, explaining all that or replicating all that, there's a, the switching cost idea is definitely very high there. So yeah, we love our house anyway, but there is an element of like, man, it's nice that all this just works and I don't have to end my work day right now with, I got 55 Z-Wave switches to install.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot.
How do you go about that? Using like smart provisioning, like scanning QR codes to...
Yes. And I would say here again, one of the things that's been so fun to work on with my mother-in-law's home is I'm a big fan of the Zeus brand. I just like their products. I like the cost of the products. I think they're high quality. Obviously, they're part of the Works with Home Assistant program now, so they're pushing out firmware updates. Beautiful. Her house, I had the luxury of knowing that brand well and kind of suggesting, okay, here's what I think you need in terms of dimmers and other stuff. Let's just go straight Zeus all the way. And the smart provisioning there, that was one of those moments, Phil, of kind of feeling, I'm frustrated how easy this is. These people don't have any clue how difficult this used to be. I think about back to the first Z-Wave, pre-S1 devices where, just getting the thing to wake up and respond to the controller. And I'm blanking on the name of the project now. Before Z-Wave JS came on the scene, even before it was included as part of the Home Assistant kind of global project.
There was Z-Wave JS to MQTT, which I think was...
That's right. There was like a C++ app. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, that's...
yeah. Oh my God.
What I remember about it was driven by one guy, incredible developer who, just to speak briefly, part of his leaving of the open source community was he was just hammered all the time with, this isn't working and this product stinks. What's going on? And he just got burnt out on it. But I remember way back in the day, it was one guy. And he had this, you had to run it. We didn't have add-ons at the time. You had to run this thing separately somehow. And it was this C++ app. And the way that you like VNC'd into it so you could click around and do things. And I remember like we got a thermostat that was Z-Wave, but we didn't have a manifest for it. And we had to like write that manually. And so anyway, I think about that and then go into like, I'm scanning QR codes. I touch the switch 3 times and there it is. And it works perfectly. But you know what? As we've talked about, that had to be the result if this was ever going to become what it's become. It's sort of this like snake eating itself. If Home Assistant became what it became because the effort was put into it to become what it became, and it couldn't have gone any other way. And that is a real pleasure. Z-Wave JS is another just outstanding project. So even my old devices are working perfectly. I never worry about anything. And that I credit to that team. But man, unloading these Zeus products and we put them in the wall and we scan a QR code and literally, in an afternoon, all these, dozens of switches are live and reporting and functional. And her house is such that I think it was right as that beautiful Z-Wave antenna was released and I was like, do I need to buy one? Should I buy one? We were fortunate enough because she's got so many wired switches, the mesh handles itself well enough. But it was another one of those moments of like, dang, this has come a long way. And it was a neat reflective moment of the efforts of hundreds of people to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned Zeus, so this is a perfect opportunity because if you need to upgrade your smart home, you really can't go past Zeus. Zeus have just updated their brand new Z-Wave long-range siren and chime, the ZSE 5800LR. You can trigger audio and visual LED alarms based on smart sensors or other conditions, and the audio speaker plays your own files for personalized automation, or there's a selection of a preloaded library. Zeus are an official Works with Home Assistant partner, helping Nabu-Casa by providing long-range devices for testing the Home Assistant Connect ZWA2 radio. Zeus offer an affordable range of affordable and innovative devices, including water leak sensors, water valve controllers, smart plugs, and scene controllers. Their Zen 78 high power relay allows you to control and monitor high load appliances up to 40 amps, which is perfect for pool pumps, air compressors, and other high power outlets. For the best prices on all Zeus products, head over to thesmartesthouse.com. That's thesmartesthouse.com. And yeah, Aaron, like great endorsement for you too, right? Like I'm glad
that's great company. And just an interesting thing to think about. Talk about integrations that I've built over time. Rain Machine is one of them. Guardian is another. That was a water valve controller. Both great pieces of hardware. Since that point, in terms of Guardian, I think that company is no longer. I'm fortunate that the API was all local, so nothing theoretically should go away. But okay. I don't know necessarily Rain Machine's position right now. I know there was a point in time where they were really going to start charging for remote access, and it just gave the indication that maybe they weren't doing terribly well. It's interesting now, to your earlier question, Phil, if something were to change, I look at an organization like Zeus and I look at, okay, if Rain Machine really dies on me here, could I not get kind of a simple little 10 gauge relay from Zeus and make that my sprinkler controller? Sure.
Yeah, exactly right.
Guardian, the thing dies at some point. Well, the Z-Wave water. So it's just so cool to watch that we always wanted there to be more focus on open hardware that wasn't tied to clouds and things like that. And I'll speak personally, there was a point in time where I really wondered, we got Z-Wave, we got Zigbee, but it feels very Tinkerer-y. And here we are, the voice of Home Assistant, the community kind of raging against the cloud, but is it really going to make a difference? So cool to see organizations that are not only shying away, but they're doubling down on these local devices. And I think they're having a lot of success. It warms my heart, because that part of the vision was always something we wanted. And I worried, that which way were the winds going to take us?
Yeah, because I think like a lot of companies chase this like whole cloud locked in app philosophy. Either it's cheap to run, or they feel as though, we've got all these users using our app, and we can market that'll be a selling point for us. But then a few years down the track, they realize actually it costs us money to maintain this cloud. It has outages, we've got frustrated customers, there's a lot of support that we have to do. Let's just kill the cloud. But then they kill half of the product features that the customers originally signed up for.
But some of them also just don't care and they'll just abandon it.
Yeah,
right?
Abandonware is a thing. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I know, we all watch the news all the time. I mean, the thing in our household we're watching currently, and my wife, as many spouses and partners are, is wonderfully tolerant of my home automation. But I think over years has come to really feel the benefits of it. One of the things we're talking about, and I feel for the people in these organizations, we're watching the news stories that talk about, mass layoffs looming in the Alexa division or the Google Home division. And, okay, so no pressure on anybody, but thank goodness a certain organization that we happen to love is talking about voice assistants and doing really powerful things there, because there may come a moment in time where we need to shift en masse because we're forced to. And, grateful for the Zeuses and the Home Assistant, communities and others who are willing to say, this isn't just a good idea to have locally controllable stuff, but we're going to put our foot in the ground, and we're really going to, do our part to help that become a reality.
So, I mean, somewhat related question. I mean, we've talked a lot about Z-Wave, and you clearly use Z-Wave a ton. How about Matter? I know, again, emerging standard, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that? And I know Matter 1.5, I think it is, just got released, which includes cameras and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts? Like, where's your head at with that? Is there value? Is there not?
Yeah. It's interesting, Ryan, in that the consumer in me can very easily get into this position of so many standards, and like, well, I got Z-Wave over here, I got Matter driven thing over here, I've got still some Zigbee stuff. Like, what am I going to do here? But there's also the developer part of my brain that just celebrates the fact that Home Assistant, it doesn't matter. It just surfaces these things, and it's a camera or it's a switch, and it just works. So I will admit there's parts of my brain that war there. What's interesting for our home, for as sophisticated as we are, we have always struggled to bring cameras into Home Assistant. And that's for no other reason than way back in the day, we owned some Arlo, was Belkin, the people behind Arlo, whoever that was.
Same.
And they were, God bless them, they were whatever. The integration never worked terribly well. We have Eufy cameras now, which they're wonderful. They work really well, but they don't expose any sort of API that developers can talk to. And so I don't know what it is. I always kind of jealously looked at the people that had like Ubiquiti Protect systems, and they had these really robust camera setups. So what do I think about when I think about a new protocol in general, Matter or otherwise? The danger is for me to get locked in that, well, is this going to make me replace everything? Do I need to start ripping things out? Which is fun, but when you're in the season of life I'm in, that's probably not safe. So I tend to think about it in the realm of, is this going to unlock some sort of new capability that I was struggling to implement previously? And you mentioned cameras. That's one that I would like to, be able to do OCR on things or kind of optical recognition of various subjects and do stuff with that information. I got to find a way to get a device in the Home Assistant that I can, reasonably operate and utilize. And so that's one area where, Matter evolving to broader standards that weren't just kind of tactical relays, switches and sensors and stuff. I'm excited about it. I'm cautiously optimistic that the people who have put the specification of the protocol together are going to keep it nice and tight. Any one of us in technology, right? There's always the talk about, look, our protocol is just expanded for all these new things. And what we behind the scenes know is that becomes harder and harder and harder to do well. And so my thoughts are awesome. I love the evolution of that. I hope it doesn't balloon into sort of this blob that people don't know what to do with.
Yeah, and that's my fear as well. We've already seen companies out there that take, hey, great, we've got this open standard, but if you run it on our software, then you also get this extra thing. Or, yeah, it only works on Matter with, I don't know, Apple or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, so and I've always said this, right? Open standard means open to interpretation, right? And so that's exactly my fear too, right? With where Matter could go is you can do all of these things. You don't have to do all of these things, right? Whereas something like Z-Wave, I think, is a lot more strictly enforced, which is like, hey, it has to be secure. That's not an option, right? Like, well, newer Z-Wave devices, right, with the S whatever standards. And it has to have these facets. Sure, if you don't have the sensor, you don't expose the sensor. That's fine, but there's a minimum set of stuff that it has to adhere to, which I really like in Z-Wave, right?
Absolutely.
And
You're right. There's a comfort there, and there's a sense too that, anybody who's kind of built product for a living knows that when you integrate with things, if that thing doesn't work, you may have some subset of your users who are intelligent enough, or that's not the right word, maybe savvy enough or aware enough to know, oh, it's the thing, it's not the platform that's surfacing the thing. But you know what? To the typical user, if a device isn't working in Home Assistant, a typical user, there's a danger of that user going, well, Home Assistant, it's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't trust this. And enough time goes on there. I don't think Home Assistant is in any danger of that, but we've seen enough products that integrate with other things. And when the thing doesn't work, it's the upstream component that really takes the punch on the chin. And that's my continued hope for Home Assistant's growth and evolution, is in just an ongoing, I guess, recognition by the users. Maybe if I can just take a moment and speak on behalf of all the people who developed for this platform, it is very difficult to have this number of integrations work the way they do consistently and reliably and with each other. There is untold hours and hours of work going into maintaining that. I know, and I've seen in the community, there are people that are frustrated with different integrations that are working. I know right now there are plenty of people frustrated with some of my integrations. I just don't have quite the time that I had in previous seasons to maintain certain elements. But part of that is, I don't know, the power of this program. Also, I just hope there's always an honest reckoning with the fact that so much of what makes it powerful is built by people who, for the sweat off their brow, decided they want to do it. For it to continue, as long as Home Assistant is going to have a solid foundation that's made up of so much community effort, well, naturally, the community's got to pass that on to the next community and the next community and the next community. And one thing that I think has traditionally been dangerous with open source, I've seen this in my own world. I come into a season where I've got a particular project. I'm so sorry, that feature request, I just don't have any capacity right now. I am totally open to reviewing a pull request from you though. And then silence. And I don't blame individuals. Look, not everybody's a software developer. Not everybody has an inclination. They've got their own lives. They're just trying to have things work. But for such a foundation to not have maybe continuity in the way that other foundations would, it does represent a little bit of a risk. Every developer has seen that meme floating around where here's this huge artifice of all modern infrastructure, and then here's some guy in Nebraska holding up a really critical component. there's elements of this project that exist because individuals brought them into existence and for its ongoing health. And by the way, I think that the Nabu Casa folks do a wonderful job at ensuring that the core experience is so extendable, it's so understandable, people can get involved. But there's going to come a day where we're going to be, we're going to pass this on to the next generation of people who want to build for this project. And that's something that I hope the Open Home Foundation and others involved here can really shepherd more and more people to be involved with the development of it so that it continues to be robust and healthy.
Yeah, that's interesting because we are going to be seeing, like typically, I'm just looking at our stats and the stats of, where Home Assistant is running. It's in homes where people own the home or, are in the stage of life. I think it's, like very late 20s, early 30s or the 40s, right? So as people age into that demographic and they start getting into Home Assistant, we want them to come in, and be welcomed into the community, right? Eventually they're going to have their own, life stages, their life seasons, and we want to be able to let them come in and, continue enhancing Home Assistant.
Absolutely. It's critical. And look, I don't know that any one of us have the answer. I think this is part of the open source challenge writ large. And I think what history has shown is that I'm not speaking Home Assistant, but maybe more bespoke specific projects. Somebody does it for a while and then life changes and it stagnates and then somebody comes along and forks it and changes it. There will always be people who are interested to keep it moving forward. This is such a special project and it's such a special group of people. And the vehicles, again, I credit Paulus and his team for building the foundation and really kind of understanding this has to persist beyond any one individual or corporate interest. Yes, there's going to come a point where we will age and we're going to hit retirement and who knows what's going to happen as life progresses on decades from now. I don't know that I've got an answer to it, but I really hope there is some thought around what is the next generation of Home Assistant community, developers, partnerships. The only way that anything like this works is if the garden is tilled regularly. It doesn't just stay, evergreen. That would just be such a cool moment too to think about. This project has already done something that so many open source projects fail to do in terms of persisting and growing and thriving. What if somehow it could also be the model by which all other projects are shown, dang, that's how that thing persists 50 years, 100 years, or what have you.
Absolutely.
Grand thinking, but why not?
Yeah.
Now, while we're getting on grand thing, I want to ask you one final question. If you could give your 2018 self one piece of advice about designing a maintainable smart home, what would it be?
I think I would have told 2018 Aaron to think about home automation and the implementation of it in kind of two buckets. Bucket one would have been just the things I want to try. I have no clue if they provide value. I have no sort of awareness of what utility they're going to provide. I don't even know if I want to tell anybody about them. I just want to watch them evolve. And then the other bucket would have been like, no, these are the things like I didn't build these willy-nilly. I didn't just have a wild hair and create 50 of them. I watched in our home these three things happen, and I know an automation fixed those three things, and that is now in the bucket of we have validated that. I think my 2018 self, very focused on my big team at work is running our product. I'm really trying to scratch my own itches, and so I got boundless energy. I think my 2018 self was putting everything in that latter bucket. And I was, hey, honey, I got like 55 new automations and here's all this stuff that's happening and they're chaining together in weird ways and nothing happened, right? My house didn't blow up. But I think, I wonder, I should say, if I could tell my 2018 self that, I think it would have released some of the pressure for me to have all these incredible automations doing incredible things. And I could have segmented my brain a bit more into, these are things I'm tinkering with, and I'm okay if they never work out. I'm okay if I come up with some automation that sounds cool to me and nobody in my family gets it because that's in my tinker bucket. and it's more of a mental exercise more than anything. But that's sort of where I feel now. You know, the one thing you asked, Phil, did we ever think about blowing up and starting from scratch? No, we never have. But the one thing I did do when the whole labeling and categorization functionality was added, I took the time to go through and label things and categorize areas.
Yeah,
whatever.
okay.
I used that opportunity. I wiped out probably 40 automations. I took us down from 120 down to 55.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I don't seem to be missing anything we blew away. Now, I could be right here at this point in my life, right 2 inches in front of my face, and I'm just not seeing it. But I'm a bit more of a believer that I destroyed things that were just there to be tinkered with. And, you know, I put a lot of pressure on myself to come up with the end all be all of automations for our life, when I wonder if I should have segmented myself a bit more. And here's my bucket just to tinker and have fun with. And if it goes nowhere, it goes nowhere.
Yeah, I like it. It's sort of like, here's your
Nice.
base, here's your bread and butter. This is the staple stuff that will, you know, make your life easier, and, you know, doesn't matter what season of life you're in. Like, this is, you walk into a room and a light turns on, right? Like, that as an automation that is valid, right?
Sometimes
Here's the
simple
other
things.
stuff, right? Like, you know, oh, maybe you want to automate your grocery list, or maybe you want to, you know, automate the music playing this time, or that's maybe not necessary. It's fun, but it's not necessary, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
And also, if it breaks, it's not super disruptive.
Yes.
Right.
Bingo. I can feel that now. You know, I'm on the road traveling, and I mentioned this earlier. If bedtime is wrecked because the security system is doing something funny, and I'm on the, like, so you're right, Ryan. There's an element too of, you know, and maybe now I'm telling myself I'm really grateful I have Proxmox running, because I could just spin up a VM and try things. But there is some, we would do this in IT, right? We would not go into production systems and just tinker with stuff just for fun. But you know what? If I talk to 2018 Aaron, I think I tell him, you're not going to know this now, because what you're working with is a builder's platform. It's designed to be tinkered with. And what it has evolved to now is you can still tinker with it endlessly, but there's a maturity and an elegance to it that you will find the value in. To your point, if you segregate, here are the things that are rock solid, we know they're going to work, and then here are the things that you're just playing with. And whether you find value or not, there's fun in the playing.
I love that.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming back and talking to us. This has been fantastic. Always good to see how people's, you know, journey has evolved. And thank you for the work on Home Assistant you're continuing to do. I always enjoy seeing your name pop up on my GitHub feed. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. Really great to be with you again, and to just be a part of this project with you in our own ways. What an honor it is, and great to be with you.
It is.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.